everyone, it's Shannon. Welcome to my channel. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome to my video, I guess. So today I'm going to be telling you guys the story of when I was pregnant when I was 12. Well, not that story. There's a whole other story time video on my channel somewhere else for that. But I'm going to be telling you my labor and delivery story for that pregnancy. So just keep on watching. I was due July 26, 2012 with this pregnancy. I had a doctor's appointment July 25th, 2012, and this was like the very first day that I went into labor. I went to a doctor's appointment that morning with my mom, my dad, and my son's father, Andrew. He was my boyfriend at the time, you know, all of that jazz. It was really early in the morning, like one of the first appointments they could have booked us for. And we had a sonogram, like it was the last sonogram I was supposed to have in my pregnancy. And it's just because they were very closely monitoring me because it was like a high-risk pregnancy because I was so young. So everything looked good on the sonogram. My doctor checked me in the room and he said I was 3 centimeters dilated. But at my last appointment, I was 2 centimeters dilated, which was a week before. But the only difference was at this appointment versus last week, since I was due the next day, like we were ready for my body to start going into labor naturally. But I had already started having contractions. They were very mild, like very, very far in between. They weren't regular yet. Well, they were kind of regular, but I couldn't feel them all the time. You know what I mean? Because they weren't just that bad. But he said that I was having contractions when he was feeling my stomach. Like he even said like, oh, did you feel that? And I said, yeah, kind of. I got like really tight. And he said, yeah, that was a contraction. So basically he told me that if labor progresses on its own, to just give the office a call, or to call the maternity ward at the hospital I was going to have the baby at. Just to, you know, ask them what they think I should do and everything like that. He told me, like, to time my contractions or to have someone time my contractions for me, like the time between and the duration they last. So we would know, like, where I'm sitting, you know? So after the appointment, we take Andrew home. Well, I say, hey, make sure you have your bag packed and all the stuff that you're going to need for the hospital, like ready to go. So if I do go into labor today or tomorrow, that it's all ready to go. Like we just pick you up and go to the hospital. I say I'm going to call him like later on and like let him know how I'm doing. So we go to my house and maybe 3 or 4 hours pass and my Aunt Lisa started timing my contractions because they had picked up so much. And they started timing about 9 minutes apart and I think 15 to 20 seconds in duration. So at that point, I called Andrew, you know, to let him know, like, hey, we got to go to the hospital. Like, my contractions are definitely picking up. I'm going to call the hospital. I'm going to let them know what's going on and see if they say I should come. But I was positive they were just going to have me come anyway because I was so young and high-risk pregnancy. So he doesn't answer. I call him again. Doesn't answer. My mom calls him. He doesn't answer. Both of his parents are at work. So we can't get a hold of any of them, and it doesn't make a difference because he's at the house. If we can't get a hold of him, they're not going to get a hold of him. Like, all of my stuff was already packed up in the car and everything before we went to his house because I was going to the hospital no matter what. So we get to their house. I go in through the back door because I always leave the back door unlocked. And I go up to his bedroom, and his bedroom was in the attic. So I go all the way upstairs to the attic. My little pregnant self trucking my way up all those stairs to get into the attic to go get him. And I tell him, hey, like, I called you a few times and my mom called you and you didn't answer. Like, we're going to the hospital. I'm in labor. He didn't hear his phone because he was on the Xbox. So no one was really mad about it, obviously. He just didn't hear his phone because he was on the Xbox. So anyway, he grabs his stuff. We go to the hospital. He texts both of his parents to say, like, hey, I'm at the hospital with Shannon. Shannon's in labor. Like, blah, blah, blah. This is her room and all of that. So when they got off of work, they could come see us. And because obviously Andrew was a minor, he needed a parent there too. Like, we sign all the papers, my mom signs the papers that she has to sign for me, everything's fine, dandy, whatever. So my labor's progressing, and my doctor comes, like, after all of his appointments are done for the day, he comes by at about, like, 5:30, because he also runs a maternity ward at the hospital that I was at. So he comes by, he checks me, and he says, okay, you're progressing a little bit. I was at 5 centimeters at this point, and I think, like, 10% more effaced. And he said, we're going to give you some Pitocin to help, you know, progress everything for you so you're not sitting here for 12 hours, you know, like, just to get it all moving. And so I get the dose of Pitocin. They asked me if I want an epidural. I declined the epidural. They asked me if I want any pain medication. I declined pain medication at the time. And that's just because it wasn't so severe that I needed anything. So it's fine. Andrew's mom gets off of work. Andrew's grandma, Andrew's dad all gets off of work, and they come to see me. So I'm really close with all of Andrew's family at this point in time. You know, I had their grandson or great-grandson. So, you know, it wasn't weird that his family was there or anything like that. And my family was close with his family and just all that jazz. They come up to see me. we're all just talking about like my birth plan, going over everything again. So we were gonna have Andrew, my mom, and Andrew's mom all in the room with me when I was delivering, obviously my doctor and the nurses. At this point in time, I really didn't, like, I wasn't uncomfortable at the hospital because I had already been here like 2 or 3 times. I knew some of the nurses, and I knew my nurse, Gail. So I was hoping that she was going to be there when I was delivering. Later on in the story, we'll get to that part. So we go over my birth plan. We talk about, you know, like, oh, my focal object. So if you don't know what a focal object is when you're delivering, it's something that you're obviously going to focus on, you know. So when you have a contraction, instead of like, you know, crunching up all your muscles and like squinting your face and like gritting your teeth, you have something else to focus on doing, so you can just breathe and focus on, you know, having a good delivery. Because honestly, when you tense up your muscles, everything is so much worse. It is so much worse, which I'm so glad that they had helped me focus on that and keeping that in mind, because I was so young, you know, it was so hard for me to do all of this. It was so good to have the support that I had, especially in the delivery room. So time's passing, I'm just, you know, labor's progressing, my contractions start to get worse and worse and worse. It's about 8 o'clock, and I think they said I was 7 centimeters dilated, and that's when I asked for pain medication. I didn't want an epidural. I was so scared of getting an epidural. I still, even with my second son, so scared of an epidural. So they gave me Demerol, and I don't even know if any of you have had Demerol, but 7 centimeters dilated, in labor, active contractions, everything, took a nap. I didn't feel anything long enough for me to just take a nap. So whatever, I take a nap, I wake up at about, I want to say 9 o'clock, and they check me again. I'm 9 centimeters dilated. And at this point, you know, everyone that was just visiting or sitting in the room, like, they all leave. My mom goes to get something to eat with Andrew's mom, and they're like, they do whatever they were doing. So Andrew's just sitting up there with me. And because I was 9 centimeters dilated, they had sat in my bed all the way up to try to just coach the baby a little bit more, so it would thin out my cervix more, like make me completely effaced, all of that jazz. So that's what they did. Oh God, it was so uncomfortable. My back hurt so bad. It turns out that I had back labor, which is just the baby wasn't turned, I don't even know how to explain this. The baby was turned backwards of how they normally come out. So I believe they normally come out like face down, but instead he came out face up, and just it put a lot of pressure onto my spine, or vice versa. I might have explained that backwards. But so I had back labor, so my back was hurting so bad. Obviously I was in labor, it was going to be painful. And then right around when they started setting my chairs up, my bed all the way up, they did shift change. So Gail, the nurse that I loved so much, and I was hoping she was going to be there for my delivery, left. She had, obviously her shift was over. She wasn't just going to stay for me to have my baby. And so another nurse came in, and she had to have been in her early 20s, and this was the only horrible part of labor. She was so god-awful rude. Oh my goodness. So it's about like 9:30, you know, like I'm sitting up, I'm still having back pain, like all of that. But this nurse is just, I don't even know how to explain it. She's so abruptly rude and nosy about my situation. Like, I get it, I'm 13, I'm in labor. That's really controversial, a very, very touchy subject with anyone. And it's a very just hard thing to wrap your head around. Like, I understand that, but I was also 13 at the time, and I didn't have a parent in the room. Andrew didn't have a parent in the room. And she was just so rude and nosy. She literally asked what a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old were doing having sex. And it's like, yeah, I get it. Like, we shouldn't have been having sex, but it happened. And just, as a nurse, it wasn't her place to ask. You know what I mean? And just, it made me really uncomfortable, and it made me really anxious. So it just really put a bad taste in my mouth, and I didn't want her to be my nurse, but I was 13. I was already anxious that she was saying anything. I didn't want to ask for a new nurse. So I just dealt with it. But she just asked stupid questions like that, and it just got under my skin, but whatever. So I think it's like 9:45 at this point. The doctor comes in to check me. He says, you're 10 centimeters dilated, you're crowning, all of that. So they start prepping me for labor. We call down to the cafeteria to have my mom and Andrew's mom come back up. We were going to wait for them to come back up so I could start pushing. And I'm getting ready to start pushing, and I said something about how much it hurt. I made a comment about it because I was in labor. It hurt. And the same snotty nurse, the same nurse that was getting, you know, asking some questions that weren't her place to ask, literally said, "You're in labor. What do you expect?" Like, I'm sorry. I'm in pain and I'm 13. Just stop. You know what I mean? So that just really got under my skin. But once again, I dealt with it. Andrew's mom and my mom weren't in the room when she said this. So I just didn't bring up anything to them, and it was fine. So about 10 o'clock, I started pushing. So we have Andrew on this side, Andrew's mom on this side. Like, they're both holding my legs. And then my mom was like standing behind me, rubbing my hair, keeping me calm, because I started crying at one point. I literally threw up from how many ice chips I had ate. That's another thing. Labor is so horrible because I was hungry the whole time. Oh my God. But, so my mom was behind me with like the cold washcloth on my forehead, like rubbing my hair, talking to me about my focal object, and just every time I had a contraction, she just, she was really good about keeping me calm while Andrew and his mom held my legs. I literally pushed for 2 hours, and that's when my doctor started saying, like, you're gonna have to get a C-section. Like, they started like gearing up to have a C-section. They had all of their supplies out. They started getting me ready to have a C-section. They literally put the iodine on my stomach, and then Andrew's mom said stop, like told them stop, she's not getting a C-section, because I desperately did not want a C-section. The baby wasn't in stress at this point. Obviously, I know that it was bad for him to be in the birth canal for so long. However, I so desperately didn't want a C-section. It was the end of the world to me, because I had a birth plan. I put so much thought into this and everything. So the doctor said, well, our only other option is, and then he said what it was actually called. I obviously don't remember what the device was actually called, but basically, then he explained it in plain man's terms. It was like a suction cup for the baby's head to help guide him out. And he said, if you're going to push, you need to give me like the hardest pushes you can get. Like the hardest pushes you have given me all night. And then hopefully this and like the hardest pushes you've given me all night will work. And I personally think that labor was so hard for me because I was so young. I didn't fully understand how to push. I know that sounds so stupid because when you're in labor, like it feels like you have to poop and you're supposed to push like you have to poop. But I was 13 and it was just hard. They put the suction cup on his head and everything, and I literally gave them the 3 hardest pushes I had that entire night. I was in tears. Like, it was just so bad. It was so bad. And with those 3 hardest pushes that I had given them, plus the suction cup on his head, he came out. He was perfectly healthy, and we made jokes as soon as he came out about how he had a cone head and like this big gorilla head because he was so covered in hair all over his head and like a little bit on his face and everything. But he and he had like a little bruise, almost like a hickey, on the top of his head from the suction cup, because suction. But he was perfectly healthy. 7 pounds, 6 ounces, and 19.5 inches long. Such a perfect little baby. Just he had a cone head because he was in the birth canal for too long. He was jaundiced. He looked very, very orange, and so they noticed it as soon as he came out how orange he was. He already looked really orange. Even though when babies first come out of the womb, they're obviously like very pale in color most of the time and very almost purpley some of the time, but his skin already had like the yellow tint to it. So they knew like right off the bat that he had to be jaundiced. So they ordered the bilirubin test like, after I had held him for the hour after they cleaned him up and everything, the like skin to skin contact. I had done skin to skin contact with him for 2.5 hours. And, everyone had taken pictures with him, and it was just, after that, it was such a successful delivery. And just everyone was just happy, and I felt so much more relieved, and just like to be holding him after 9 months was crazy. Like this, I made a little person, and I was 13, and just it was so hard to wrap my head around. But after that, it was just like everything was fine, just the normal baby stuff. Sorry about the camera angle change. I ran out of storage, but yeah, he was jaundiced when he came out, perfectly healthy. It was a good delivery. I was at the hospital for about 5 days afterwards because I was so young, but I had like a 2nd-degree tear, and the stitches from the, I don't know what the cut is called, but they make a cut when you're in labor sometimes, so stitches for that. They were just waiting for me to pass a bowel movement on my own. But after that, everything was normal. It was a good delivery. That's it. If you guys want more videos, just comment some ideas below. If you want to see the labor and delivery story of my son that I had when I was 16, comment for it. I'll definitely do that. I'm going to be uploading every Monday and Friday. So yeah, subscribe, like, share, whatever you want to do. Follow my social medias. They're going to be posted after the video and linked down below. Bye guys.